In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace your fuel injector on this Ford F-150 with a 5.4 liter V8. Let's get started. Before starting this job, let's remove the pressure from the fuel system so we can work safely. To do this, we're going to have to remove the fuel pump fuse and crank the engine. At the front, right above the radiator, there may or may not be a plastic cover here. In our case, there isn't. Push these two tabs and open up the main power distribution box is what this is called, or fuse box. When you open it, you'll see that they're all numbered. If you have doubts, you can reference your owner's manual. It should all be clearly labeled in there. Number 8, which is this relay over here, is the fuel pump relay. Grab it and pull it out. This will disable the fuel pump, and therefore, when we crank it, as the fuel injectors are trying to spray, it will just spray the remainder of the fuel that's in the lines and not add any extra. So let's do that. Crank the engine. It might start, but it will turn off eventually if it does start. There we go. I'm going to show you how to do this on the driver's side of the engine because it involves a few extra steps, but the procedure applies to the passenger side as well. But I want to show you the extra steps, which is why I'm doing it this way. On top of the intake, you'll notice this silencer here for the intake, this black box. It has a hose clamp over here and a 10mm bolt here, which we'll have to remove and get this out of the way so we can gain better access to the fuel rail. I'm going to use some needle nose pliers. You can use any other tool that you might have that fits in here. Squeeze the clamp, and this should lock in the open position. I'll show you how to unlock it when the time comes. And now let's undo the 10mm bolt that's right here. Take this out. Now you can pull this whole thing aside. Unclip and remove this PCV hose. There's a gray clip on the back side of it. If you pry it this way towards the fender and pull up, this should come off of here. Now there are two 8mm bolts that we have to remove to get this part of the fuel rail up. This one over here, and then there's that one in the back there, which is a little bit more difficult to see, but you can access it. So grab your 8mm socket and remove both of those bolts. This one in the back will be a little trickier to get to, but you can still get it if you have an extension on your socket, or you can just get it with a wrench, whatever you prefer. Wiggle the whole fuel rail up. Should be able to move around. Be gentle with it. You don't want to break anything or damage other injectors that you're not replacing. I'm going to spray some brake parts cleaner at the base of the injectors where they go into the intake. This is going to help me with two things. One, lubrication, and two, it will clear any debris that's there. Oh, there we go. Fuel rail popped out. If you don't want to take the whole thing out, you don't have to. As you can see, my method worked great. At this point, you can replace either of the 4 injectors on this rail. I'm only going to show you one because, of course, the procedure is the same for all. And I'm going to show you the procedure on this particular injector over here. Unplug it. And at the top here, you'll see that it has a clip. It has to slide out towards the intake. Usually you can just push it out with your fingers. As this clip comes out, make sure it doesn't go flying on the engine. You're going to have to reuse it to lock the new injector in. If you can't pop it out by hand, you can just use anything that you have to pry with, or even a pair of pliers or something, just so you can get this clip out of here. There we go. So this is what it looks like. The cupped part goes up, and then the two flat pieces basically go around the top of the injector like this. And now, with that disconnected, the injector should be free to come out. Give it a couple twists, and there you go. There will still be fuel in it and in the fuel rail, so keep that in mind. And there's your injector. Now grab your new injector and put some fuel up here. I had the fuel line, or the fuel rail, covered with my hand, and at this point, the best way to get these seated, I let some fuel drip down in there. There's fuel on the rail. Everything is lubricated. So what you want to do is just press it down. That should seat it into the fuel rail. Double check it by hand. Take your clip and clip it on the fuel rail to ensure that it's locked in. Make sure the electrical connector is facing that way like it was before, because the clip will only go in if it is facing that way. It's not going to go in otherwise. It's slotted in a specific direction. Okay, put it around the base here. It should lock in. There we go. That's locked in now. You shouldn't be able to spin this clip. I mean, a little bit, a little twist is normal, but you shouldn't be able to spin it around. This means the fuel injector is locked in. The best way to get the whole fuel rail to seat is with brake parts cleaner. So grab some brake parts cleaner, spray the bottom of each fuel injector O-ring. Obviously inspect them all to make sure they're good. If not, replace them. And once you've sprayed all of them, push them down after you line them up. That's it. They should slide on easy peasy. Reconnect the fuel injector that you replaced. And let's put the 2 bolts in for the fuel rail. Now this time, you do not want to use any power tools if you did to remove, because there are fuel fumes. Power tools sometimes, well, as long as they're electric, they can make sparks. And I don't need to explain what happens when you have fuel fumes and sparks mixing together. Once you get both the bolts started, let's bottom this out. Now you want to make sure that you're not pushing this fuel rail down with the bolts. You want the injectors to seat prior to this step. Just like I showed you, if you have to press the injectors down with a lot of force, something's wrong, something's not lined up. Double check your work, because it should not require a lot of force. Okay, that's bottomed out. Give it about 1/8 of a turn. After it bottoms out, there we go. Make sure everything is reconnected as it should be. Get the PCV hose reconnected. Make sure that's locked in. Get the air intake resonator back on and line it up with the bolt hole. I'm going to put the bolt in before the clamp goes on. That way I know it's perfectly seated. Once again, no power tools here, even though it is tempting. You do have fuel fumes lingering. Snug that up. And here's the trick to these clamps. Get a screwdriver, little pry bar, trim tool, whatever you have. Stick the pointy part through the hole and then pry down on the small tab over here. There we go. If you pry just right, it'll snap back into place. So make sure your hand and your fingers are not next to it, because it will hurt. Now let's put the fuel pump relay back in. Close this up. Now let's prime the fuel system to make sure that we get rid of any extra air that's in the system. Turn the key to the on position and just wait for a few seconds. Turn it back off. Do this again. Every time you do this, listen for the fuel pump. You should hear it turning on and then back off. It'll be very subtle, but it will be there. One more time. And now let's start up the truck. There we go, runs perfect. Take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.